Hello, River Arts Festival 2020. My name is Brad Smith. The festival is going to be virtual, of course, this year due to COVID. I've been asked to do a reading. I'm actually going to do two readings because I was fortunate enough to have two books come out this year. The first reading is going to be from the Goliath Run. This is appropriate because it's a very political book, and with the election going on in the States right now, it's very timely. One of the protagonists in the book is a guy named Sam Jackson. He's a right-wing talking head and a bit of a blowhard who's got a lot of bombast and not a lot of scruples. His ratings are failing, though, and when there's a school shooting near him, he says some incredibly crass and insensitive things about the parents of the kids who were lost. He thinks that he's going to get fired for this, but the opposite happens. His ratings go through the roof, and before long he's asked to run for Congress, and he accepts. The other protagonist is a woman named Jo Matheson. She's lost her goddaughter in the shooting. And she is, of course, infuriated by Sam Jackson, but she knows there's nothing she can do about him. And then one day she decides there is something she can do. She kidnaps Sam's 10-year-old daughter. And the ransom will be that Sam has to apologize for these remarks that he's been making. So I'm going to read a short piece from the book now. This happens right after the kidnapping, and you're going to meet Sam Jackson's wife, Rachel, and you're going to meet a cop named Bell and another cop named Olson who are doing the investigating. "The kid is dead," Olson said. Bell was driving, moving across town on 96th Street in heavy traffic. They got in the call while they were at the station, just coming on shift. First, they'd driven to the office of the car service to talk to the manager there, and now they were heading for Sam Jackson's house on the Upper West Side. It was a few minutes to 7, and the streets were moving at a glacial pace. "You don't know that," Bell said. "I know stats," Olson told him. 3 hours in, 99% of the time, the kid's dead. Assaulted, strangled, tossed in a dumpster of the river, some variation of that scenario. "You're a cheerful bastard," Bell told him. "Hey, it's in my blood," Olson said. "I'm Scandinavian." Bell glanced over to see if he was making a joke. He and Olson had been partners for less than 2 weeks. Bell didn't know the man aside from seeing him around the station. A tall, heavy-set scowler with a shaved head and rimless glasses. He was in his 50s, pushing retirement, Bell would have guessed. "From where?" Bell asked. "Sweden." "But you were born here," Bell suggested. "What are you, first generation?" "Hell no. My family came here in 1897. "Then it's about time you cheered up, isn't it?" Bell said. Olson shrugged. "I'm just telling you, the girl's dead." "I'm not so sure," Bell said. "If this was a random grab sex thing, then I might agree with you, but this feels different." "Different how?" "Well, the celebrity angle for one, the money factor for another. And then there's this disgruntled driver who'd been given notice." "Maybe he's the perv," Olson suggested. "Maybe he is," Bell said. There were a couple of uniformed officers at the Jackson house. The wife's name was Rachel. She was on her feet in a living room that opened into a huge kitchen. A tall, good-looking blonde, early 40s maybe. The place was nice, the furniture and fixtures expensive and tasteful, which surprised Bell somewhat. He'd seen Sam Jackson's show, and he was expecting something garish. Gold taps, nymphs and fountains, like Trump. Presumably the wife was in charge of decorating. She was understandably on edge, but dry-eyed. She had a friend there with her, a skinny brunette with puffy lips and artificially tanned skin. There was a pot of coffee on the island that separated the two rooms and a box of pastries from Starbucks. Bell guessed that the friend had bought the food. Olson took the uniforms aside and talked to them before telling them they could go. Rachel Jackson waited till they had left and then turned to Bell. "You guys are detectives then? What have you found out?" "We talked to the manager of the car service," Bell said. "The car isn't back yet." "It's him," Rachel said. "It's that driver." She indicated the door just taken by the uniforms. "I told them that." "Yeah, and they told us," Bell said. "We're checking him out. Sean McElroy, right? You recently gave him notice?" "That's what this is about," she said. "That vindictive son of a bitch took my daughter." "Well, you might be right," Bell said. "Then why isn't that man in custody?" the brunette demanded. Bell looked at her, wondering if the Botox had seeped into her brain. "We don't know where Mr. McElroy is at this time." He turned back to Rachel. "As of right now, we don't have the car, and we don't have McElroy, and we don't have your daughter. We do know that McElroy was bonded, which means that he doesn't have a record and he's not a registered sex offender. If he did this, we should just hope that he's, teaching you a lesson, in his mind anyway." What kind of a person would do that? Rachel asked. What do you know about him? Olson asked. Did you interact with him at all? Not really, Rachel said. Just to say hello once in a while. My husband thinks he's a boozer. Olson glanced at Belle. McElroy's boss had suggested the same thing. Rachel pulled a cell phone from her pocket and walked away as she punched in a number. She stood looking out a bay window for a long moment before turning back to them. Why doesn't she answer her phone? Belle walked over. Your daughter has a phone with her? Of course, Rachel said. It goes right to voicemail, which means he turned it off or maybe he destroyed it. Did you tell the officer she had a phone? Olson asked. No, I didn't think to. They didn't ask? No. All right, Belle said. We need the phone number, we need the server, and the account number. We can trace the phone. Even if it's turned off? It might get turned on, Olson said. Can you get us that information? While she went into another room, Belle looked at the brunette. Friend of the family, he asked. Probably Rachel's dearest friend. Your name? Lila DiMaggio. DiMaggio, Belle said. You related to the Clipper? Clipper, she asked. You mean like a barber? Never mind, Belle said. He indicated their surroundings. Where's the husband? He's in Wyoming. The brunette was quite dramatic in her body language, her manner of speech, but on his way home as we speak. He's a very famous person, you know. She glanced toward the other room, then leaned close to Belle and whispered, and they're very well off. That's what this is about, if you ask me. This driver wants money. Which is a good thing, right? I mean, as opposed to being a sex crime or something like that. Before Belle could respond, Rachel returned with the paperwork on the daughter's phone. Olson took it from her and sat down at the island with his cell to call it in. Belle watched as he poured himself a cup of coffee and took a scone from the box while he waited for someone in the tech department. Belle turned to Rachel. Her lips were tight, her breathing measured. He could see she was doing her utmost to keep it together. I want you to tell me what happened when you gave McElroy his notice. What he said, how he acted, anything you remember, Belle said. He asked for another chance, she said. And when I said no, he said I wasn't being fair. Was he pissed off, Belle asked, raising his voice. Did you feel threatened at all? He was more whiny than pissed off, like the world was against him. One of those guys. One of those guys, Belle thought. Those guys don't usually abduct children. They're more likely to be found on a bar stool somewhere telling their tale of woe to anybody who will listen. But Belle couldn't know that about this guy McElroy. There were exceptions to every rule. At the island, Olson hung up his phone. He sat there with his coffee. Obviously, he was okay with Belle doing the dirty work. Belle turned to Rachel again. All right, there's something we need to cover here. I will apologize in advance, but I have to ask. Is everything okay with you and your husband? What are you talking about, she said. Is there a chance that your daughter might be with your husband? Belle paused. It happens sometimes when couples aren't getting along. This isn't one of those times, detective, she said coldly. Sam's in Wyoming. He announced 3 days ago he's running for Congress. I'm not sure when he would find time to abduct our daughter, even if we were having problems, which we are not. Okay then, Belle said. Olson's phone rang and he picked it up. Yeah, he said, and then listened. No shit. Hold on, we're on our way. He hung up and looked at Belle. They found the car. Parking lot over in Williamsburg. Rachel moved towards Olson at once, her bottom lip quivering. She wanted him to tell her more, and when he didn't, she asked, Vanessa? No, Olson said. He looked at Belle, but they found the driver. He's not our guy. Why not? They found him in the trunk. That is the Goliath run. Thanks for listening.